Blog Talk Radio.
And welcome to another edition of Carnivore Radio. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. We have Fran Keough. She is a noteworthy life coach, motivational speaker that really specializes and focuses on transforming people. Many of us are in that position, who are overwhelmed, confused, and basically looking for direction, and helps people get that direction. Correct, Fran?
Yes. Can you hear me okay, by the way?
Oh, we're all good.
We can hear you fine.
Okay, good. I just did an adjustment to my volume, so great. Yeah, good to be here.
Great. Thanks so much for being on Carnivore Radio. And, it's so timely that you're on. And, Eric, I think you would agree with that here's what I think about, what you do, even in the best of circumstances, transforming one's life, getting a new direction. It's not easy, but I guess, when we first talked off air, how do you, in this situation, in this climate, holding on to one's dreams is difficult enough. How do you do it under this situation?
I think the very first thing, or pretty much all of us need to acknowledge, is where we are at that moment in time, and to meet ourselves exactly where we are. So acknowledging your feelings, and my God, where the feelings of fear and anger, frustration, overwhelm, we're all experiencing at different levels and for different periods of time. And sometimes there's a tendency to say, well, I've got to get on. I can't stop and spend time on this because I have family that depends on me, or I have employees, or whatever it might be. And yet I think it's critically important to acknowledge those feelings, to sit with them, to be with them, to process them for a period of time. And that period of time is going to vary from person to person. I think you can't dwell on it for too long, because then you become paralyzed.
Sure, but let's say you were working with, one of your clients. They were on a road to a new direction. This comes up totally unexpected. How do you not just become sidetracked and say, okay, I've had obstacles in the past, we've worked through them, they were very difficult. How do you not just say, okay, this is just too much?
Well, first of all, I don't want to be flippant, and I don't want to treat it lightly and say, we'll get through this, we'll get over it. Well, yes, most of us, with our work and our whole situations, this, and I hear this from my coach, I hear this from the people that I, do some group coaching with, that this will pass. We will get through it. The problem is we don't know how long it's going to take. So acknowledging that piece also, but it's really important to pivot if you need to. Leverage leverage your experience, your knowledge, and start looking at how you can implement that. So what's important to know is that we have goals and we have dreams. And money is not enough. Money is incredibly important, so I'm not negating that in any way. But when we are trying to hold on in normal circumstances to our dreams, because, there are days that show up that are just awful. Sometimes there's weeks and months, and what's going on right now is certainly at least months. Even under those normal circumstances, we will have days where it's just, frankly, crap. And so how do we keep moving through that? And I think the key is to have a really powerful why, to know why you're doing what you're doing at a deep level, not the surface. We go below, because that anchoring in that is going to help you get through. So, for example, just revisiting that, the why never changes usually. So the deeper why, for example, it might be about freedom. Ultimately, I want the freedom to spend time with my family, to work the hours I want to work, to do the work I choose to, know and love, etc. Okay, but why do you want to do that? And that comes under the heading of, in many cases, freedom. I want to generate the income to have that freedom. So being very clear and sure on that, I think, is something we need to revisit anyway, periodically.
I agree with that. And, Frank, could I just interject something before I throw it out to Eric?
Please.
I saw a show, and I don't know why I can never forget this. It was on, like, the Discovery Channel, and it was about survival. And there were three aspects in terms of relating to how some people survive a catastrophic event and others don't. And I remember one of them, and I forgot the other two because it was so long ago, but I'll still remember this. One of the key aspects was this too shall pass. So if you're in an avalanche and things aren't looking good, some people that just acquiesce will say, well, this is going to go on forever, and they kind of just give up, whatever, okay? Other people say, I'm in a situation. You understand my point, and the thing about all this is you even mentioned this is like we don't know how long this is going to go on. So how do you hold on to a dream, a mission that you might have actually gotten some traction on, but now all of a sudden it's like no one really knows, and anyone who says they do is kind of just saying that. There is no one who really knows when is this going to come to an end. So doesn't that really throw a monkey wrench into the kind of people that you're working with, the people that are going on to all those great things, and you have something like this? I mean, it's catastrophic to some degree.
Yes, and I certainly have a bit of an issue with this, the phrase, this too shall pass, but because ultimately it does. We don't know what's on the other side, but eventually it does pass, whatever. And the duration of this is obviously going to bring about far more anxiety than one would normally. So again, I think processing that, thinking about your why that you can hold on to, then say, okay, if my goal cannot be reached on the journey, on the path, if you like, that I was taking, how can I pivot? How can I change that to continue to get to that goal? It might take on a very different format. So, for example, if you've been doing a lot of in-person work, but you can develop an online program with your work, obviously that is going to be one solution. But I think there's a lot more. Those are practical pieces, but what about the emotional pieces? How do you continue to generate that ability to just kind of keep going, right? And some people are better at it than others.
How do you keep that energy? We have Fran Keough. We're on Carnivore Radio. And, Eric, before I throw it out to you, you can invite our listeners to call in if they'd like, correct?
Yes, if you'd like to be part of the conversation, you can call us at 563-999-3693. That's 563-999-3693. And
I know you're going to go to Eric, but we can come back to this. I do have some practical tools that have helped me that might help other people too. So, but I'd love to hear what Eric has to say.
Eric?
Actually, that's actually a great segue. I love what you said about knowing your why. One of my favorite books is Start With Why by Simon Sinek.
Oh, it's lovely.
Going back to what you said about how important it is not to dwell on things and to actually take action. How do you help people, who have trouble getting out of their own heads? I mean, yes, we need to be able to move forward, but I've worked with a number of people that have a lot of problems getting out of their own heads and just actually setting foot and taking that action. So what do you recommend folks like that do?
Well, that's where powerful coaching comes in. I mean, it really does, because so often we get in our own way. Most business problems are personal problems in disguise, and if not all. And sometimes it takes a few sessions with somebody, and hearing them, letting themselves speak and hearing their answers and delving in and asking powerful questions that they can have those aha moments. You ultimately have to get somebody to visit that place where they simply realize that there's some things that are just, that it's self-sabotage. I had a conversation this week around that very subject, and it's powerful when it works, but you have to be able to ask the hard questions, and you cannot be just a friend to somebody. You have to be able to basically, if you'll pardon the expression, call out the bullshit.
No, I agree with that. And one thing
absolutely
that you and Eric were talking about that I think is interesting before we go right back to Eric is I believe that momentum in doing, if you always are looking at, contemplating about doing something or looking for the excuses, it develops a certain mindset. But just by going forward, even in horrible situations like the coronavirus, that does change your mindset, doesn't it, Fran?
Well, yes. I mean, these are surreal and extraordinary times. This is, one could take the general principles that we use in normal circumstances, and it's almost like you have to ramp them up. And, one of the things that a lot of people, especially very smart people, the smart person syndrome, they spend a lot of time looking for clarity, trying to get that to that piece of perfectionism before they start putting their work out there. And actually, it's the other way around. You've just got to get out there and do it. So momentum actually brings clarity, not the other way around. And how we could apply those principles to what's happening right now is, that classic little steps, those baby steps. I think when we get really down in the sort of in the bog, in the mud, and we are depressed and it's very hard to see our way out, sometimes by just doing one small thing every day, that can help push you forward.
Interesting. Eric?
Yes. I'd like to go back. You mentioned that you have some practical examples or exercises that you could share with our listeners. I'd like to hear what you've got.
Well, again, I consider these tools and I make suggestions to people because things work better for some than others. But one of the things that I have found consistently that has helped me is a daily meditation. And we're not talking for an hour. I can almost hear some of the audience going, oh, no, I can't sit there for an hour and my mind won't keep still. And honestly, when I teach any kind of yoga or meditation class, it's about taking maybe 10 minutes or starting out with 5 minutes if you've never done it before. But especially if you could start your day, sit down and go, be very still, physically very still, and just focus on your breathing for 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, and then you build up to maybe 15 minutes. If you can just do that over time really does help. So that's one piece.
I think that's absolutely fantastic. I do guided meditations, and one of the things that's on the meditation I love is that they always say it's about progress, not perfection. So it's more important to start and do it than to get it absolutely right. So we'll go. And
right some back people, sorry, go ahead.
So if you can just hold that thought, we'll go right back to you in a second, but we have to break for our sponsor.
Hi, Chuck. I want to know, what is the sensation The census is a special time when we count every single person in the country.
Do kids and babies count too?
Of course, counting everyone in your home helps support your neighborhood by funding schools, hospitals, and more. So complete the census by calling, going online, or returning your form by mail. It's totally private.
Visit 2020census.gov and
Make your family count!
Brought to you by Carnegie Corporation of New York and the Ad Council.
And we're back. And if you'd like to be part of the conversation, you can call us at 563-999-3693. That's 563-999-3693. And
very good, Fran. I'm sorry. Go. We have Fran Keough. She's a life coach and motivational speaker, and it's a very opportune time for her to be on Carnivore Radio. Eric, I think you'll agree, because we are in extraordinary times, and transforming one's life is difficult enough, but under these conditions is supernatural. Correct, Fran?
Yeah, I don't think most of us have ever experienced anything quite like it, and I would love to say that I'm keeping my balance and I'm just being cheerful and optimistic every day. But, I'm human and I'm not perfect and I'm not an expert. But I do know some of these pieces that work and that have helped me. And, some of the things, we've talked about meditation, even just a very small meditation, 5-10 minutes. And then intentions, I think, are very helpful too. If you can get back to writing out your intentions for the day and thinking about, how do I want to show up in the world today? Who needs me on my A game, for example? Those kind of questions to start the day can really help sort of set the tone. And on a bigger scale, on a larger scale, about going back to our goals and the aspirations that we have, that what we really want to create in our lives, that is something I think it's really important every day to think about those and to imagine as if they're already happening. And I'll tell you why. This is not woo-woo. Some people think, you think about it and it's going to happen. Well, it doesn't quite work that way. But what does happen is that when you have a choice every day you get up. I can be negative and I can be pessimistic, or I can focus on everything that I don't have and that I don't want, or I can do the opposite and I can focus about the things I want to create. And what that does, it puts you in a mindset. So you go out into the world with a more elevated energy, and it makes you more conscious of the other things around you. Think about it even physically. When you're down, you're kind of looking down, and you're being more introspective. When you're more optimistic and cheerful, you're looking out, and you see things, you notice things, and there's more synchronicities that you're aware of that come across your path. So it's not magic. It just makes perfect common sense. Why would you want to go out in the day feeling miserable and thinking about all the things that you don't have, right?
Do you believe in the law of attraction that actually does, again, The Secret came out like 10 years ago, but do you actually agree with what you think about does manifest?
Not necessarily. I think The Secret was a nice idea, but I don't think it was very well fleshed out.
Yeah, I don't mean it that way, but I'm saying, like you were saying
right,
about the negativity.
Right. I think that it doesn't have to be magic, but it has worked for me multiple times, and I see other people where it works. If you think, you have to do the work. Some people think you can just kind of stare at the wall, say Om, and think good thoughts, and it's all going to change. No, you have to still do the work. But it's a mindset, and it's how you go through your day, how you go through your week. And as much as you can generate that energy, yes, I think it does. At some level of energy that it attracts. Well, you're more attractive, right?
Yes, I would agree with that, because it's interesting that, before I throw it out to Eric, is that it's interesting because in my own life, I was in a situation where I was doing amazingly well in business, and I went on these interviews, and people couldn't get enough of me. And then, unfortunately, I was downsized, same person, essentially the same age, and I couldn't buy a job. I think it was the energy that I put out, and I'll never forget that lesson. Eric?
Yeah, it's very important, the energy you put out. I mean, the secret is very simplistic, but if you think about it more logically, when you are in a positive mood, when you're doing things positively, people want to be around you. We all have that person in our lives that every time you talk to them, it's, oh, things are terrible, nothing good is going to happen. And how often do you really want to talk to that person? So, being in that positive mindset really does work because you're attracting people to you. And let's face it, no matter what your dream is, nobody accomplishes everything on their own. It's all about relationships and getting help to build up your dream.
Derek, that is an
absolutely.
amazing point because it's so true. And it's also true what you said about there's people, I'm sure, Fran, you had that in your life too. There's people just today saw his name coming up on my phone. I'm like, oh, God, no. A friend, and we've been, I've known him for years, but it's like, I'm really having a great day, and, oh, do I really want to pick this up? And I did, and it was a disaster. No, I'm just kidding. No, but we all have those people. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and to that point, Jeffrey, I think that's another tool. As much as you can possibly do it, is to make sure you surround yourself as much as you possibly can with people that elevate you, don't drag you down. Now, that's not always possible. I'm being realistic here. Sometimes we have to work with people that drag us down. We have family members, and God only knows with this situation where people are stuck in the house together, it can be a lot harder. But wherever you possibly can, you do have a choice to select friends, and you can let go of friends.
I think that's really very, very actually critical because there's been people and experts that have talked about like where you are in life would be very indicative for the in terms of the 8 people that you're hanging around. I think sometimes people are like crabs in a pot. In other words, if someone's trying to get out, they'll try to bring them back down. I think Charles Barkley said that. And I think that's sometimes true. Even people that you think are your best buds, people are threatened if you're doing better than them.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. So I think all these things that we're talking about, things that I employ in normal circumstances, I think that given the current circumstances, we have to ramp them up. But, there are going to be times and moments in your day that maybe your week that it's you can't find energy. You have to generate it. So how do you generate energy? And everybody, again, is different. But I find going in nature, being out in nature is my salvation. That really helps to restore my emotional energy. And, even if it's a short walk or even it's just taking a break from what you're doing, just breathe. And that's another thing that goes along with the meditation is breathing. We all tend to be shallow breathers in our culture. So if you can take some good deep breaths and be very conscious about your breathing, that can really help energize you too.
Eric, that's a really big point that Fran has in terms of trying to recoup your energy. Don't you think that's really kind of very critical in terms of moving forward?
Oh, it's absolutely crucial. There are a lot of different breathing techniques that can help recharge you. On our sister podcast on the Xvadio Network Success Showcase, we were just talking about Qigong and yoga. All of these things help to center you. And it's so important because our minds get distracted by everything around us. So taking that time to really take care of yourself is crucial.
One of the things that's really I've noticed since this pandemic is that it's in some ways, for me, it's easier to be very mindful and very in the moment because I don't want to think too far down the road because you can't. We don't, because with so much uncertainty, we just really can't. How do we plan a vacation? I mean, I think maybe it's a good thing to plan a vacation as long as you've got the cancellation policies in place. But, you know, being present each day is such a gem. And I try to start my day. When I wake up, I have a moment of gratitude. Thank you. I am, to the universe, whoever, I am breathing, and my feet are touching the floor, and I can get up and move. You know, it's a good thing. It's
very much
yeah,
so, and it's also. Go ahead, Eric.
It's so important to focus on what you have. You know, people are, you know, get distracted. It's like, oh, it's, you know, all of this is going on, but no matter what your situation is, there are people that it's much worse for. You know, before this pandemic, I used to remind people, you know, just by living in the United States, you are part of the 1% globally, and you need to be grateful for that. Now, it's the same thing. I still have my health. I still have my job. I have my family, whatever it is that motivates you. You really do need to focus on what you have.
I think that's an excellent point. Go ahead, Fran.
To that, that is critically important because, and that's another thing I say to myself every day when I start getting a little bit down or frustrated with the whole situation. You know what? I can't go to the hairdresser. I can't go to a restaurant, whatever. These are first world problems. I have a roof over my head. I have family. I have, a pantry with food in it. You know, these are things that we take for granted. And in this moment in time, it's wonderful to recognize that a lot of us have those things. And like you said, it's a first world problem that in some cases that we're experiencing. So
I would agree, but before, you know, because we are kind of running a little bit out of time, but one thing I want to ask you before, we go, and Eric has his last, chance for a really good question, is how do you deal with people that you might have worked with that have really done everything right, put everything in order, were launching their big dream, and then this happens? That's got to be tough.
Yes, it is. I think of somebody who's my ideal client, wonderful woman with a nonprofit organization. And it just came to a grinding halt. And then she's got 2 young children at home, too, and she had to work from home, and she has a music school. And it's enormously hard for her because, you know, suddenly she's fighting for survival for her organization and her employees. And, you know, I've told her a lot of the things that I've shared with you here today, and I've been staying in touch with her. She's sort of on hold right now because she's just, you know, we're not working on the business coaching piece at the moment. We're in survival mode. So I'm working. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's kind of where
Eric,
it's at.
last question.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Actually, we're hitting our end. So, Fran,
it's a great opportunity. Fran Keough, let's talk about how people can our listeners can get in touch with you and your great work you do.
Oh, you want me to tell? Okay.
Yes.
They can reach me through my website, which is frankeough.com, and that's FranKeough. My email is Fran at Keough. No, I'm sorry, Fran at frankeough.com, and then my website's FranKeough.com, right? And that's probably the best way. Or through you.
Great show. Fran, thanks so much for being on.
Thank you. It's been great. Thank you, guys. Stay safe and well.
You've been listening to Carnivore Radio. You can catch the replay as well as the Carnivore Bites podcast at the Apple Podcast Store, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you find podcasts. We look forward to you joining us next week.